Written by Plato, the Apology of Socrates recounts the defense speech made by Socrates at his trial. While traditionally understood to be simply Plato's tribute to his recently executed teacher, one could say the apology also gives us some insight into the personal philosophy of Socrates. In his defense to the charges leveled against him, Socrates proceeds to claim the charges are not only false but contradictory. Conscious of his lack of knowledge, while also being proclaimed the wisest person alive by the oracle at Delphi, Socrates faced a strange dilemma. He details how he put this claim to test by seeking out all those with a reputation for wisdom to see if he is indeed wiser than they are. This effort of his focused on three groups of people: politicians, poets, and craftsmen. After a thorough investigation, his search led him to conclude that the oracle was correct, not because Socrates knew more than those he examined, but rather because he admitted his lack of knowledge. But this search came at a hefty price. In this self-proclaimed quest for truth, he insulted the politicians, poets, and artisans in the jury by claiming that when it came to justice and piety, none of them knew what they were talking about. The process of cross-examining and ultimately disproving other people's claims to knowledge did not go down well with those examined, and led many to think that Socrates is claiming to have all the answers himself, something that, of course, he never claimed. Moreover, much of the youth was inspired by his example and began cross-examining people themselves. The unhappy recipients of this questioning blamed Socrates. They assumed that he had deliberately trained the youth of Athens to call into question both existing beliefs and the authority of their elders. In response to this, Socrates employed a range of different arguments. He argued that not only was he innocent, but was also a benefactor to those who sat in judgment upon him. He attempted to establish his innocence by invoking the Socratic paradox that no one willingly does evil. At one point in his speech, he even used his modest financial condition as a sign of sincerity, suspecting that the jury would be likely to resent someone more prosperous than them. And when offered, he rejected any favors from friends. The result of this trial, quite obviously, is more popular than any of the details mentioned so far. Socrates claimed he found death preferable to dishonor, and so death was what he was condemned to. Now, although his speech might not have been successful at winning him acquittal, it does lay forward critical principles of his personal philosophy that any student of life would find helpful. So, what are these principles? Let's find out. Number 1. Know that you know nothing. In an age where misinformation and half-knowledge reign supreme, it is essential to ask ourselves if we know anything at all. If yes, what do we know? Can we define it in such a way that our definition holds true in any and all instances? Do we understand this thing that we claim to know so well that we can teach it to the young and the old, to the educated and the uneducated, to the industrialist and the scientist and the politician? And if we can't, do we know anything at all? How can we teach if we don't possess any knowledge to pass on? This method of bare-bones questioning was symbolic of Socrates. You may liken it to a child asking why in response to every explanation offered to them, annoying yet effective. Through this method of asking questions, Socrates concluded that politicians, poets, and artists didn't really know what they claimed to know. And it is this method of questioning that we must employ in our lives to protect ourselves against any ignorance arising from false or incomplete information. It has been said that inaccurate or incomplete knowledge is more dangerous than having no knowledge at all. And to guard against the ego, to stop ignorance from taking over, it is essential to understand that you know nothing at all. Number 2. The philosophical life. For Socrates, the essence of philosophy lay in self-examination. He was less concerned with examining others than with urging others to investigate themselves. He stated that he spent all his time trying to persuade people, young and old, only to make their first and chief concern not for their bodies or for their possessions, but for the highest welfare of their souls. The philosophical life for Socrates should be about giving your attention to truth and understanding and the perfection of your soul, and not towards the attainment of as much money, reputation, and honor as possible. The real test is the examination of the self. The task of philosophy, according to Socrates, is to take care of oneself. You can accept no responsibility for the lives of those around you the same way they can't take any responsibility for yours. To each their own. Everyone must be accountable for whether they choose good or bad, virtue or evil. What you fill your mind with and how you act is entirely on you. And this leads us to the third cornerstone of the philosophy of Socrates. Number 3. What you know, you show. As controversial as it may sound, according to the philosophy of Socrates, criminals are not people who are evil and deserve to be punished. Instead, they are simply mistaken and need to be enlightened. Socrates denied the existence of weakness of will. He claimed that no one willingly does evil. For example, a thief does not commit the act of theft to cause harm to another person, but rather because he thinks this might be a suitable way to fulfill a need or desire of his own, be it putting food on the table or acquiring wealth. And so for Socrates, philosophy is something that is necessarily expressed in one's actions. We all act according to what we think is best, and if we sometimes do the wrong thing, something that is against our own best interests or morally wrong, then it is not because we were overcome by desire or we gave in to some weakness. Instead, it is due to an error in our reasoning, or, more often, a faulty conception of what is best for us. For Socrates, the wrong action is never intentional, but rather the product of either an unintentional mistake or simple ignorance. As another example, the problem that a chronic smoker faces is not one of willpower or weakness of resolve. It is a problem of knowledge and understanding. Despite what they might say, they simply do not yet know that smoking is bad for them. For Socrates, the same applies to moral mistakes. And so the way to make fewer mistakes and act better is to know better, because, number 4, if you knew better, you would do better. If the quality of what you know determines how you act, it would be fair to assume that how you behave can be used to indicate the quality of what you know. Any significant transformation in your life will also transform your philosophy, since an individual's philosophy is necessarily expressed in their actions, whether they like it or not. So, according to Socrates, while it is better to act virtuously rather than merely talk about virtue, the ideal is to be able both to act virtuously and to be able to give a definition of virtue if cross-examined. Or, to put it another way, your actions and words should always be in harmony with one another. Using this idea, Socrates argues that his practice of questioning and cross-examining is an expression of what he truly holds to be the right thing to do, and nothing can stop him from pursuing this path. Only a philosophical transformation can change his behavior. He does not require punishment. All he needs is an argument or a reason to show him why he is mistaken. His philosophy is what makes him act as he does, so only a change to his philosophy can stop him. Number 5. Truth is not welcome everywhere. As Plato himself put it, no one is hated more than the person who speaks the truth. And in his defense speech, Socrates had regard for nothing else but the truth. He was clear that his intention was not to delight and persuade, but to educate. But he probably never considered the fact that it might take a strong person to speak the truth, but it takes an even stronger person to accept it. And so, considering what Socrates wanted to achieve and how high the stakes were, he took a significant risk in speaking the way he did. The events that conspired stand to serve as an example to everyone. Regardless of what you aim to achieve, truth is often a dangerous ally. It may seem like the obvious and rational choice in many instances, and it might even be capable of providing a simple solution to a complex problem. But often, a person's pride is more important to them than the truth, and thus, regardless of how powerful it might be, the truth is not welcome always and everywhere. So, what do we learn? Socrates was probably sincere in his intention. The best sign of his sincerity was how his words managed to irritate those present at the hearing, compelling them to vote to convict. Had he tried to arouse any warm feelings among the jury to convince them to acquit, the story might have been different. But that is the key. He never tried. Conscious of his age and his impending death, he deemed it better to retain his dignity than to say or do anything just to win acquittal. Was it the right choice? You decide. Those who think he was wronged may find solace in the fact that he did get his respect, eventually, and those who believe he was guilty can rest easy knowing that justice was served, and it was served well. Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing for more thought-provoking content, and here is some more philosophy for you to dive in.